Hello everybody and welcome to the very first installment of On the Mat. It's great to be here. We're coming to you from beautiful Winkler, Manitoba, Canada. Today we're talking about some of the funniest ribs and road stories that have stood out in our minds over the years. I know it's the podcast age and some of these stories may have been covered before. Some you may not have heard and some you may have. But nonetheless, we will get them all on the mat right here today. Before I start the show, first of all, I want to give a shout out to the guys at Levels of Wrestling, whom I first told I had an idea to do a podcast, and they gave me some pretty kind advice. They got a pretty kick-ass podcast they do on Wednesdays and Thursdays, I believe, Lowdown and Breakdown. If you haven't seen them, check them out. They're awesome. Keep up the good work, guys. Except for the occasional over-the-line Bret Hart stroke joke. It's all good. Just kidding. As well as Mind of Carnage, New Age Insiders, and Raw as Gibby. Check these guys out. I'm so happy that there's people out there keeping the discussion going and keeping the fire alive. The fire that is wrestling. Keep up the good work, guys. Anyway, a little bit about myself. I've been a wrestling fan since 1993. It was April 4th to be exact. My older brother, who was 14 at the time, I was 7. He was heading over to our cousin's place to watch wrestling. Now, at the time, I had never seen wrestling. I had no idea what it was. I had kind of begged my mom at the time to let me go with him, just because I wasn't stuck home alone, I think, and ended up being a little jerk and conned my way into going with him, and thus getting to see WrestleMania 9. From the moment it started, I was hooked. It was something that I'd never seen before. It was quite the spectacle. I mean, looking back on WrestleMania 9 now, it may not have been the greatest WrestleMania, actually probably the bottom 5, but for me watching that for the first time as a little kid, I thought it was pretty badass. And I wanted more of it immediately. And I've been a fan ever since. Even growing up in school, it's all I would talk about. My friends would tell me to shut up. Most of them didn't like wrestling or care for it, and still don't today. So that's why I'm so happy that Twitter is out there and I have this opportunity to make my thoughts and my opinions known and have a discussion about wrestling on my own. So thanks, Twitter, and thanks to everybody that is making this possible. We're equally as passionate about wrestling. I had a buddy named Dustin when I was younger. We were best friends, and he was the only person I knew that loved wrestling as much as I did. We were both equally as passionate. He actually lived in an apartment just down the street, and this apartment that he lived in had a beautiful patch of green grass, nice soft grass, nice lawn, and it had a fence that kind of enclosed it. So to us, that was the Silver Dome, and we would be out there for hours. We would have 1 hour and a half Iron Man matches, some submission matches. It was pretty wild, and I think we were really good, and we thought we were really good. Because everybody on that side of the apartment building would look out their windows, and everybody would watch us, and it was like we were in front of 60,000 people. It was great, and we were both good workers, I thought. And we would have these 60-minute Broadways and even longer sometimes, and it was so fun. And for us, wrestling wasn't just a TV show. I mean, it was a dream. It was our lives. It consumed us. And it was also a place to escape from the pain and the reality of life sometimes. I miss those days. As Dustin and I got older, we kind of parted ways. I'd moved away. I hadn't talked to him for a long time. And a few years ago, Dustin passed away of a heart attack, and I never really got to say goodbye. So in memory of my fallen comrade, I dedicate this podcast, and I want to thank everybody for listening. Let's get this show started. Over the years, I've been trying to figure out what it is that makes us keep watching wrestling. What is it that makes us crave more? It's like a drug. There's no other feeling. There's no drink or synthetic drug out there that can duplicate the feeling of seeing The Undertaker lose the streak, or the infamous Screwjob, or the infamous Hulk Hogan heel turn. These were all moments that made our hearts stop for a second. Even when wrestling was in the shitter, in the mid-90s, 1995, 96, where we saw some of the worst angles I think we'll ever see. Even to today, like some of the storylines they're doing now, like the Reigns and Big Show thing, like nobody wants to see that. I hope that's over. I'm glad it is. Or anything involving The Miz is, to me, is just garbage. But we know we're going to see these things again next week on Raw, but we tune in anyway. That's just how we are as fans. We're loyal. We're not going to miss it. We truly are the most loyal fans on the planet. And the best part is that we can agree to disagree. We can have discussions on Twitter or anywhere. And we can totally disagree about who we think should be the top guy. And we can get passionate about it, but we don't get mad at each other. Because we're all fighting for the same thing. We all love the same thing, and it's the business. And it's the love of wrestling. We keep watching anyway. We just hope that things got better. We didn't abandon it, and we didn't find another sport to watch. This is my take. If you've ever seen Wrestling with Shadows, Bret Hart's documentary, the first line in that film is, "It's so hard to find a hero anywhere anymore." Which is true. And as an 8-year-old kid watching wrestling, for me, he was a hero to me. With guys like him and Razor Ramon, it sure as hell wasn't some old bastard telling me to say my prayers and eat my vitamins. That was not getting over on me. But having a hero to watch every week on TV is what made it so awesome for me. And still, I find myself, I'm almost 30 years old, and I still want the same things in wrestling. I want them to knock off the political bullshit. Let's build up some heroes like we used to. If you're going to pick a guy, run with him. Don't build him up and shove him down our throats so much and then make him lose to Cena 3 fucking pay-per-views in a row. It doesn't make any sense. But nonetheless, we're going to keep watching anyway. Let's get that old feeling back like we did when we were kids and watched it for the first time. Like I said, tonight we are talking about ribs and the road, and I would like to begin the season off on a light note. We're talking about some of the funniest stories we've heard from the road to backstage altercations. From trashed hotel rooms to prison cells, from bar fights to hellish plane rides, border crossings to outraged fans, or sometimes you're just waiting in line at a fucking Dairy Queen. If you haven't seen the Dairy Queen video, you gotta check it out. It's Chris Jericho, Chris Candido, and Jim Cornette and a bunch of other people in a van trying to get some grub at Dairy Queen. And they place this big long order in the microphone, and then they pull up to the window, and they finally get to the window, and the girl inside thought that they were kidding. Well, this Jim Cornette saw red, got out of the van, walked up to the window, stuck his head in the window, started calling the lady there a dumb fucking bitch, and just cut a promo on her. Meanwhile, the guys in the van are crying so hard, they're laughing so hard. If you haven't seen it, check it out on YouTube. It's hilarious. Jim Cornette, Dairy Queen drive-thru. But let's get all these stories and more on the mat. Basically, these guys are on the road 300 days a year, give or take. More so in the 80s and 90s. That's a long time to be away from your family. You're missing holidays, you're missing birthdays, you're not being home with your family. It's got to be tough. It's got to be tough on these guys. Like I said, especially back then when they were driving up and down the road for countless hours, day after day, day in, day out, with the same guys. It can really test one's patience. And we've all heard stories of brawls and fights happening backstage as well. When you're riding up and down the road and you're rooming with the same guy, like I said, you get sick of each other. You get disgusted with each other. Your tensions rise. So I think to pass the time and to keep from losing all sanity, I think it's only human nature to have some fun at someone else's expense. Most of the time, it was all in good fun. But shit does hit the fan from time to time. In this business, you take the good with the bad, and you take the bad with a grain of salt if you ever want to survive. These guys all can't lose their smiles and go home. Wouldn't get anywhere if they did. But we cannot talk about ribs without mentioning the greatest ribber in the history of ribs. Of course, I'm talking about the Rocket Owen Hart. From comedic Slammy Award moments to disguised voices, Owen was a guy that wanted nothing more than to get out of the wrestling business and to be at home with his family. He wanted to be a firefighter. He never actually wanted to get into wrestling, but wanted to help out the dying Stampede Wrestling. And then later in WWF years, being a slave to a contract. But Owen always found ways to amuse himself and everybody he came into contact with. He is definitely one of the greatest ribbers of all time, if not the greatest. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say a ill word about Owen, and probably never will. He's greatly missed. I think one of the funniest stories I've heard was from an Ahmed Johnson shoot interview, where he tells a story about one night getting a phone call from somebody claiming to be from the Tonight Show with Jay Leno, and that they wanted to have Ahmed on later in the week, and that the Thursday or the Friday that there would be a limo there to pick him up at his hotel, 8 p.m. sharp, to be ready. So, happier than a pig in shit, Ahmed goes out and he buys a $4,000 or $5,000 suit. He gets himself a nice gold watch and some bling and gets himself right primmed up. So the day comes and it's, they're picking him up at 8 o'clock, so he's out on the curb, he's waiting for the limo to show up, and he's waiting and no limo. All of a sudden he's joined by Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith, and they look at him and Owen says to Ahmed, "Hey, I thought your limo was supposed to be here at 8. And I guess Ahmed's first thought was, "How did you know about my limo? I never told anybody." And then it dawned on him that he'd just been screwed over. He'd just been punked by the best. And that's a great Owen story. I like the way that Ahmed tells that one. Or the one about Reg Park. We've heard that one at Bret Hart's. It's in his book, and it's on his Hall of Fame speech, where he talks about being in a hotel and Owen was downstairs and phones up to the room and Stu answers. And Owen pretends to be Reg Park. For those of you who don't know, Reg Park is he was the guy back in the day that made all the belts. So Owen phones up to the room, and Stu gets on the phone, and Owen's going, Stu, we never really went at it. I could kick your ass. And Stu's getting a little upset, and after a little while, he says, "Well, Reg, if you wanted to try me, why didn't you try me?" And Bret Hart was also in the room with Stu at the time, and I can't remember if he knew what was going on, but I think he had a good idea. And after a few minutes, Stu just ended up slamming the phone down right in the face. And Bret asked him what the hell that was all about, and he said, "Oh, that damn Owen, he got me." And I always liked that story too. I thought it was pretty funny. Anytime Bret Hart tells any stories about his brother is a good time. Or he would randomly, order 10 pizzas for the hotel room next door, and the pizzas would show up, and somebody would always get stuck with this hefty bill. And Owen would pull shit in the ring as well too. I look at the time he had a match with Bret. I think it was on Raw, and he tied a cord around Bret's leg to the post, and actually tied about 5 knots in this cord on purpose, so Bret couldn't get out, and he was freaking out because he didn't know what to do. Or the time that Owen was to wrestle Mick Foley, and found out that Dave Meltzer was going to be in the audience that night. And he vowed to get the worst rating they possibly could from Meltzer. Yes, of course, I'm talking about the popcorn incident. There was a popcorn maker, and it was supposed to be some kind of hardcore match. And Foley was hitting Owen with these bags of popcorn, and man, he was selling them as if they were, 18-gauge steel chairs. And at one point he was making snow angels with them in the middle of the ring, and it was just god-awful, but if you watch it, it's one of the most hilarious things you've ever seen. And, read Dave Meltzer's report on that one. It's pretty funny. We all missed Owen dearly, and we'll be talking more about him next week on an episode titled World Wrestling Underrated, where we discuss some of the most underrated wrestlers in history, why their respective runs didn't pan out, which ones self-destructed, and which of them deserve some Hall of Fame spots. But anyway, back to the stories. I heard one this week that I gotta tell. I think it's pretty funny. It involves Mick Foley, Steve Austin, and Bill Regal. And they're on a beach in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It's a beautiful day, and the boys are enjoying a day off in paradise at the beach. And I believe Austin and Regal were on the sand getting some color. And Mrs. Foley's baby boy was swimming away carelessly in the water. After a little while of swimming, he looked over to where Austin and Regal were sitting and noticed that they were gone. Foley felt a little ditched and a little PO'd and kept swimming away anyway. Eventually, after a few minutes, he started going back to the shore, and once he got close enough to the shore, he kind of noticed that things were a little off. As he got to shore, he noticed that there were a whole lot of naked dudes everywhere, and apparently they were, quote-unquote, getting real close. He ended up getting the hell out of there and found his way back to the hotel room where Austin and Regal were waiting, laughing their fucking asses off. I bet I would be too. That's a pretty funny story. Some good stuff. Speaking of Mick Foley, I recently saw some of his stand-up on YouTube, and I gotta say, he's not bad. It's actually, some of it's pretty funny. His wrestling comedy, he calls it. I've definitely seen worse. I gotta say, keep up the good work, Mick. Keep up the wrestling comedy show. I definitely want to see some more. Let's go on to a rib right now. Does anyone remember Jonathan Coachman? Or just Coach? He happened to be a victim of a Mr. McMahon rib. He was encouraged by Jerry Briscoe, I believe, to go around to all the guys in the locker room and start an NFL pool. With all the guys in the locker room and just staff in general, I guess. And so he did. Well, a few weeks later, he got to his show, and I can't remember who it was, but someone had come up to him and said that there were cops there, and they were looking for him on illegal gambling charges. And the cops actually found him and handcuffed him, and I don't know where they got it, but they actually had a dirty pair of Mr. McMahon's underwear that they threw over his hands to hide the cuffs, to kind of hide the shame. And they made him walk out past all the wrestlers, who all had disgusted, embarrassed looks on their faces. You know, they were just disgusted with him. The Undertaker was one of them too, who gave him a dirty look. So the cops, they take him, they put him in the car, and they drive away. I guess they got about a mile down the road, or half a mile, and the cop looks at Coach and says, "Oh, I forgot my partner, we gotta turn around and go back." Well, as soon as they got back there, they saw the whole locker room standing there, laughing hysterically. That was Coachman's introduction into the WWE. And initiations were the norm, probably still are. But let's go on to a different story now. We're going to talk about one of our favorites from the late 90s. Talking about one of the former most sexiest divas of all time, of course, Sunny, Tammy Sytch. She had a knack for rubbing guys the wrong way, and also the right way, depending on which way you look at it. But she was dating Chris Candido back then, who was also Skip from the Body Donnas. And Chris was a good guy, and he was well respected among the boys, especially with the clique, like Kevin Nash and Sean Waltman and those guys. They were pretty close. And they didn't like the fact that Tammy was going around and being a slut and basically blowing all these guys behind Chris's back. They didn't like that, and they'd kind of had enough of her. So one night, she ended up getting a little side dish in her catering box. Before the matches, the wrestlers sometimes place an order with catering what they want to eat after their match, so they can take it immediately back to their hotel and enjoy some food before they go to bed or whatever. Well, hers was tampered with. I believe it was Chinese food that she ordered, and yeah, that's not exactly what she got. But I gotta say thank you, Sean Waltman, for taking a big steaming shit in her catering box. I think it was well deserved. Apparently she even took a bite of it. Don't know if that's true or not, but apparently she did. But moving right along, let's talk about Haku. You remember Haku, or Mang, for those WCW hardcores? Well, the rumors about him being the most legit tough guy in wrestling are definitely true. Kevin Sullivan tells a couple good stories. One of them being about them being in a bar, and some very inebriated guy comes up to Haku and starts going off about how he's a fake wrestler and he's not real tough. He's just an actor. It's all bullshit. Well, I believe Haku was a little under the influence at the time and wasn't going to take that bullshit. Apparently, he got up and he grabbed the guy by the face and bit his nose off. That's the story. He legitimately bit a fucking guy's nose off. If that's not tough, I mean, I don't know what is. Ted DiBiase also said that one time they were at a bar and Haku tried to break up a fight. And apparently 8 cops had stormed in and maced Haku and then handcuffed him. He then apparently closed his eyes, sucked it in, snapped the handcuffs, and kept fighting. And I think the moral of this story is you don't fuck with Haku or Meng. That's definitely one guy I wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley. But on to the next story now. Let's go back to the AWA days. Marty Jannetty, Shawn Michaels, Midnight Rockers, coming up in the world, partying hard every night. They also hung out with a guy named DJ Peterson who was coming up at the time. Scott Hall was there teaming with Dan Spivey. If you don't know who Dan Spivey is, 1995 he was Waylon Mercy, which was one of the best of the worst gimmicks of the year. I think that one could have flew had he been about 10, 15 years younger and not so beat up. But anyway, Marty and DJ Peterson at the time had rented a hotel room one night, and they had some female companionship in there with them, and a few vices. Long story short, the room had gotten completely trashed. The next day at the show, Marty was hungover and passed out on a table in the dressing room. He next thing he remembers is waking up on the floor in a substantial amount of pain, and people were going nuts. And he saw Scott Hall storm out of the room. Apparently, he then went looking for Scott with a pipe, and didn't get too far until Bulldog Brown, I think, and Geigel had held him back and took him to the hospital because his face was pretty fucked up. But the next day, they were in St. Louis, and when Marty got to the show, he immediately saw Hall and went over to him and said, quote-unquote, "Hey, motherfucker, you want to go another round?" And Scott allegedly put his arm around Marty and said that, you know, he apologized for the whole thing and that he was actually worked over by DJ. Well, what had happened is someone had told Scott that Marty and DJ had rented the room under his name and trashed it on purpose. It was actually DJ the whole time. But, you know, that kind of shit was the norm at this time. I mean, people used to do this shit and still do today for their own sick personal amusement that make great stories for fans to tell for generations to come. If anybody watching can tell me a sport organization that has been banned from more hotel room chains than wrestlers, I would be surprised. I don't know if there is. Keeping on with Marty. Marty and Shawn actually were starting to fall apart at the seams in the early 90s, and they'd actually gotten into a drunken fight one night at a hotel room. And the room got trashed, and it got pretty heated, and the cops ended up showing up. Macho explained to the police, Macho Man, God rest his soul, was actually there and explained to the cops that these two were actually just going over their match for tomorrow, and that they weren't actually meaning any harm to each other, and actually said that he would pay for the damages. And the police at the time actually believed this story, and I think they even got out of there with an autograph or two. But within 6 months later, maybe even sooner, the Rockers were officially over. This was the start of an internal combustion between the two. In my opinion, I always thought that Marty was going to be the one that goes all the way to the top. I thought he was so much better than Shawn and actually carried him through a lot of those early AWA matches. Showed him the ropes, introduced him to all the people. Marty, I mean, if it wasn't for Marty, I shudder to think that Shawn would have made it as far as he did. But anyway, I'm getting off topic here. Next story I want to talk about now is WCW 1995. My man, Leon White, Vader, gets a call from Eric Bischoff, tells him he needs to do a photo shoot that he'd been putting off for a while, and explained that, hey, you know, if I do this shoot, I'm going to be late for the show. Can't be late for the show because Paul Orndorff is the booker. We don't get along. He's going to hate my guts. We're going to get into it. Bischoff says, don't worry. Do the shoot. I will talk to Paul. Well, that never happened. Vader gets to the show later after being late, and Paul gets right in his face immediately, calling him a fat piece of shit and every other name in the book, and proceeds to get in his face. So what does Vader do? He hits Paul Orndorff so hard, he knocks him on the back of his head, and Orndorff landed about 3 or 4 inches from this steel shed that was there, and just about cracked his skull open. Could have killed the guy. So feeling bad for him, he said he wasn't going to fight back. Orndorff got up, gave him 4 shots to the face, and wouldn't let him go for a 5th. He said that was about it. Got held back and ended up giving him some kicks to the face, and it was pulled apart. But like I said, that's not the first time that a wrestler and a booker got into it, and it won't be the last. Another good story is the plane ride from hell. We all know about that one, so I won't go too far into it. I think the fact that needs to be mentioned about that plane ride is the fact that Scott Hall was on that plane. And despite all the chaos and shenanigans that went on, he was not involved in any of it. So I got to say props to Scott Hall for that one. Another one I want to mention quick is Bam Bam Bigelow. If you haven't seen Bam Bam's shoot interview, check it out on YouTube. It's about 3 hours long. He tells a story about the King of the Ring 93, him versus Brett. Brett goes for the victory roll and farts right in his fucking face. He says that they were drinking all those protein shakes and they made for some deadly, deadly farts. I like the way he tells that story, and I thought it was a good one. I've spent countless hours watching shoot interviews on YouTube, and there's a lot of good ones, there's a lot of strange ones, a lot of dark ones. But it's from these shoots that I like to obtain these stories. Mainly because I don't believe a fucking thing that I read on the internet. It's always good to hear things right from the horse's mouth. But I gotta cut things short today. It's such an honor to be doing this, and I hope people listen to it. I hope people like it. It's been a blast talking ribs and road stories. I'd like to bring you more in the future. Please tune in next week for our next episode, which will be called World Wrestling Underrated. It's going to be a good show. We're talking about some of the most underrated wrestlers in the history, and why they didn't pan out, and who deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. This week, your task, the listeners, is to think in your opinion of the most underrated superstar in wrestling, and we will get it on the mat next week. Next week, I will be coming to you live, and we'll be going at least an hour, so get your tweets ready. Thank you so much for listening, and remember to keep the discussion going, and also remember, if there ain't no fans, there ain't no discussion. This has been the inaugural episode of On the Mat. Thanks again. Come back next week. We'll get more on the mat. Thanks for listening. Have a good one.